What's the dumbest rule your school ever enforced? My school had 3 staircases along a very long corridor. We were banned from using the middle staircase because it got overcrowded. The ban was lifted once they realized it only made the other 2 staircases just as crowded. Not being allowed to wear hoodies, jackets, or sweaters that lacked the official school logo. I was a high school teacher for several years, both buildings I worked in were freezing, and having admin pull students out of my classroom during a 50-minute period giving them detention instead of letting them learn is cruel and completely unnecessary, in my opinion. If you throw snowballs, you get a 1-day suspension. The first long weekend after a snowfall everyone would throw snowballs to get an additional day added to the long weekend. You can only use 3 squares of TP. You had to wear your ID around your neck on a rope thing. Then the chokings started. Candy canes were outlawed because you could sharpen them to a point and use them as a shiv. I went to school in rural Washington. We were definitely weren't somewhere that shankings were to be expected. Elementary school principal banned talking at lunch. If you were caught talking or even signing to someone, you had to go sit by yourself on a folding chair with no table. There was once my mom came to eat lunch with my older sister and I. The principal was like, "Oh, you should go eat out in the hallway with your daughters," and she was like, "Nah, I'm gonna sit here with my daughter and her friends and talk to them and enjoy their presence." Usually if a parent came for lunch the student could invite one friend to join, unless you had siblings. Then it was too many people, so you couldn't invite a friend. Anyway, one of my older sister's friends whispered to my mom that she was going to move so she wouldn't get in trouble for talking. This was a 9-year-old. My elementary school had those super long tables with little stools attached. Whenever a class got in trouble for being too loud during lunch, the punishment was that we had to sit every other seat. Even at like 7 years old I was like, won't we just have to talk louder to hear each other if we're farther away? I got Saturday school for missing a day of classes when I was 16. Seems reasonable, except I missed to go complete my US citizenship and officially become a citizen alongside my mom. It took us 12 years to go through the legal process, BTW. Whole other issue. I had a note from my mother as well as a signed official federal form they give you to explain to school employers why you were absent. Apparently the only acceptable absence excuse was illness. I got punished for becoming a citizen. And now you're one of us. Congrats. Edit to add, it's like that was the last part of your citizenship journey. Getting fucked BC of it. That if you say to anything back to your bully it becomes a mutual conflict and distant bullying, so if they start calling you slurs and making you feel bad every day and you call them stupid once or twice the school probably won't help. Also dress code required school branded hoodies, they were $50. If you wore a non-school hoodie you got in school suspension. After 9/11, my school instituted a zero-tolerance policy on bullying and violence. What 9/11 had to do with bullying, I don't know. Anyways, Halloween 2001, I dressed up as the guy from Clockwork Orange. He carries a cane around. The principal pulled me aside, told me walking around with a cane could be a weapon, therefore just walking with it is an act of violence, and suspended me for a couple of days, telling me that after 9/11, we don't mess around with that kind of stuff. Edit, this happened in Quebec, in a small town. The new principal made a morning roundup rule where anyone arriving to class after the last bell had to go to the cafeteria and listen to a lecture about not being late for class. This took about an extra 15 minutes, making the students even more late to class than they would have otherwise been. Needless to say, everyone hated it, even the teachers. That principal didn't last long. Toilet paper rationing. This was in 199,798 BTW. Apparently the high school girls' room was going through too much toilet paper, so the dean, a woman, stood outside the door and distributed a few squares of one-ply institutional toilet paper to us as we went in. If she noticed toilet paper on the floor, our ration got cut down. If we asked for more for bigger jobs, we're told to saved it for home. There were several episodes of girls stuck in stalls until friends could beg for more TP because of period messes or unexpected bowel incidents. The dean wouldn't even hand it over, she would go in the bathroom and pass it a few squares at a time over the door. If you didn't catch it as it fell and it landed on the floor, well, that's your fault and you're not getting more. If you used more than she thought necessary, tough luck, go to class with bloodshed on your body. It took about a week of extremely angry parents coming to the school and calling both the school and the school board, but we finally got our toilet paper back, unlimited. How did we celebrate? By ping her car, of course. Did they not stop to think about why teenage girls specifically were going through that amount of toilet paper? Edit do just want to clarify that not all teenage girls experience periods, and not all teenagers who experience periods are girls. Still, about 98% of people using the girls' bathroom are going to need a lot of toilet paper at some point in their lives. I was sent to the principal in elementary school for getting a drink of water out of line, as in we walked down the hall in a formation, and we had designated water drinking stops. To this day I still remember the principal asking angrily, well, what if everyone started getting water without permission? And I still don't have an answer. Well, all. Be hydrated? If we didn't see it happen, it didn't happen. All it did was train bullies to be really good at keeping their voices down and being aware of their surroundings so they could avoid doing shit within a teacher's line of sight. It meant if you were ever outside of a teacher's vision range you were still fair game for heaps of abuse, and if you tried to report things that teachers didn't see, then the teachers treated you like you were making up bullshit. It also didn't stop teachers from enforcing double standards, like believing reports from their personal favorites even when they didn't see it happen, since they could just claim they saw it happen if it was contested. That school was basically a training facility to turn bullies into stealth experts. No beads. Apparently they thought beaded jewelry was gang-related. Nothing says hardened criminal like matching bead bracelets that say BFFs 3. You can tell who the gang leader is because he has the most charms on his Pandora bracelet. It wasn't really the rule that was dumb, but the reason for it. In my last year of high school, the school issued a rule that all students had to wear student IDs. If you didn't, you had to immediately go and pay for another ID. While you can see how many students may have saw this a way to skip class, the reason for this was the school shootings that happened the previous year. The reasoning was that it would be easier to spot who is a student and who is not a student to then see who has malicious intent. Except that most shooters were students. So. My school did this my junior year. Because a 60-something-year-old man drunk off his ass with a knife came onto campus and sat down in a class. Obviously, IDs are the only way to discern between drunk old men and high schoolers. He got in because the gate guard wasn't doing his job, but this same guard could spend every fucking morning hassling me about smiling and looking like a friendly woman. All the policy really did for me was make me miss my bus constantly. We were not allowed to have facial hair at all. Like to the point where the principal would walk around during lunch with razors and shaving cream and do stubble checks. Absolutely ridiculous, and he would send tons of us to the bathrooms to shave during lunch, no matter how small the stubble was. I got a suspension for holding a stick. The phone call with my mom went something like this, only slightly dramatized. School MRS. Thequek, your son has been suspended. Mom, oh my goodness, what did he do? S, he was holding a stick. M, did he hit someone with it? S, no. He was just holding it. M, did he threaten to hit someone with it? S, no, just held it. M, did he refuse to put it down when you asked? S, no, he was very cooperative. M, so what did he do wrong? S, he held a stick. M, and I should be upset about that? S, absolutely, you know we have a zero tolerance policy. M, right, well, I'll talk with him. As you might guess, I did not get in trouble at home. He has a stick called the police razor. Mine starts playing. Something similar happened to my brother when he was a little kid. He found a cool-looking rock at recess and wanted to bring it home, so he was carrying it around to put in his backpack when they went inside. When they called my mom, she went down to the school demanding a meeting. The VP claimed it could be used as a weapon, so the second the VP picked up his pen to sign whatever bullshit punishment he was trying to give, my mom started screaming, Hess got a weapon, Hess got a weapon. Because a grown man with a pen can cause a lot more damage than a 6-year-old with a rock smaller than his fist. My brother got a light verbal warning. 8 of this is not the first time my mom has had to flip her shit at school officials for us kids. My mom is 51 and 100 pounds soaking wet, and she never missed an opportunity to go to bat for us kids. I had a highly abusive teacher when I was a kid that my mom straight up assaulted in front of the principal, VP, counselor, and 2 security officers on camera. She didn't even get a slap on the wrist. ETA2 for the people asking why my mom is wet, you'll crack me the hell up. Don't judge her for chasing fish. To those wanting me to tell her that y'all love her, after a lengthy convo, I reminded her of why I was reaching out right now. A bunch of people on Reddit say they love you. Do you have a message for them? My mom responds, what the fuck is Reddit? Gods, I love this woman. Please tell your mom I love her. Went to school during the time where health and safety suddenly started going crazy. They introduced a no contact under any circumstances rule, i.e. no touching another person. We were like 6 or 7 years old. Suddenly one day, not only is tag suddenly illegal, but they actually enforced it. I remember one day like 70% of the school's population was pulled off of the playground and made to sit on the floor in the hall for the crime of just playing the games that children play. I remember in 4th grade me and my friends would play tag every day during recess, but one day they made touching other people illegal because someone could get hurt. Our whole outside area had that playground padding. Everyone still played tag anyways, so they eventually got rid of the rule. My school was in a poor area of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Not a lot of schools here have money for anything. Because of a huge donation of books at the time I was in school, my school got an absurd number of books, including expensive ones. There were a few dumb rules, but the dumbest of them all? We basically couldn't touch the books in the library without permission. It might sound reasonable at first, but check this out. The library was huge, and there were lots of books, including contemporary classics, non-fiction like The Last Problem, English literature like Infinite Jest, How to Kill a Mockingbird and whatnot. Dude, there was so much there, that place was probably the most valuable place in the entire school. I mean, it was awesome, there were enough books there for each student to lend about 100 every day. Here's the problem, the library went all but untouched for the entirety of my time there. Why? The amount of work it took to read one of those books was ridiculous and pretty much made sure not a single student bothered to try. First, you couldn't take any of the books home, period. Forget the fact that they had your address and all your parents' info, so in the case that someone took it and didn't return it, they could just get it back. It had happened before, at least once before the rule was made. Second, you couldn't leave the library with them, no matter what. Third, if you wanted to read the book, you'd have to do it in the library at the lunch break, which was about 45 minutes, so unless you weren't hungry ever, you had only a few minutes to go to the library. It was only open for a few hours around the break and not at all at any other time, so unless you stayed there for hours until the break for the afternoon classes, you just wouldn't have another chance. Those hours around the break could be used for you to be tutored by a teacher, which almost never happened. Fourth, once you went through all of that, you could only read the book under the observation of the people that volunteered to work in the library for credit, which was never more than 2 or 3 people, sometimes no one. Which means that if you got there and there were already 3 people there, forget it. Unless you were willing to read it standing up close to where the book was kept, and even then they'd check on you every minute or so. Fifth, you couldn't get inside the library with a backpack, with food, in groups, speaking. Without the appropriate uniform you couldn't get in with the gym one, for instance with other books, earrings, necklaces or anything that could make noise while you were walking. Some were reasonable, but the issue was that one simple mistake and you would get banned. Sixth, any banishment from it was permanent. I complained about it once in the 2nd year and was never allowed inside ever again. I even tried to get some teachers to help me, but it didn't work. Seventh, and probably the dumbest, only the students that had a certain amount of high grades could get any book at all. If you got something like 410 on your last biology exam, you couldn't even get inside the library. The standard was so insane, only 6 other students, and I in my classroom, had enough good grades to get books. In all my time there, the library was basically deserted for the majority of it. I tried to go there many times, but it was too much work. Out of all the books I only managed to read 2 Brazilian ones, A Guerra do Lanche, The Lunch War and Blackout, which I remembered to this day in details. There were times where I legit thought about straight up ditching class to read some of them. I tried to get more, like The Last Problem, Kafka's Metamorphosis, Ulysses, which I know I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I was just curious, A Brief Story of Time, Wuthering Heights, etc. But the amount of work it took was so much that it was just almost impossible to be able to read more than 1 or 2 books a year, and even that took dedication, because I basically had to sacrifice part of my lunchtime. The rumor was that the principals we had more than one basically saw us as savages who would destroy the books if we were allowed to touch them, and even though they had no reason to believe, so the library worked well without those restrictions a year before I had gotten there, with only minimal incidents, and even those didn't result in the books getting destroyed. TLDR, my school made it very hard to read the huge amount of books they had. This isn't a rule, homies made a full-on constitution for the library. Playing cards at lunch was prohibited because it promoted gambling. Had the same rule. Most teachers didn't enforce it unless you were actually gambling. In grade school, we weren't allowed to play on the playground equipment when it snowed. Eventually, we weren't allowed to play with snow or even go near it. I got in trouble for sitting in snow. This was in Minnesota, where it snows half the year. Recess basically consisted of milling around the blacktop for 30 minutes. Ah yes, I remember the ridiculous snow rules in Minnesota growing up. In my elementary school we weren't allowed to throw snow or make snowballs of any size including rolling big ones. What ended up happening is that each grade very small class sizes would make their own snow forts from existing snow clumps created by the plows. The demand for snow clumps was furious, and so we would then attack other grades' snow forts to get more resources, i.e., steal the clumps of snow making up their base. Without the ability to throw snowballs, we'd just body slam each other instead. It was chaos and also likely more dangerous than snowballs lol. Edit no, I didn't go to your school, I think Minnesota kids are all just born to body slam each other. We once had a rule that we could only go to the bathroom during class. Not in the breaks. Only during class. Really weird that this is the reverse of most bathroom policies being brought up here. Was there a reason for it? Probably to prevent gathering. If during class most students would be in class and the staff would know who was in bathroom at what time. Closing boys' toilets because some cunt was stealing toilet paper. When school staff announced this stupid rule, some students actually threatened to shit on the tables then.